3, 2, 1. Oh, and we're live. Right. Hello, everyone. I am back this time with another guest. You've seen him before. This is Kaspar, our Danish minor nations and Italy expert. Can I say that, Kaspar?
Yeah, you can. It might not be true, but
well, today we are celebrating that the new Bersaglieri's plastics from Warlord Games came out, and at the same time we're also celebrating what we hope will be version 2 of the Armies of Italy, basically. Because Kaspar, you've been helping a little bit with making a alternative Armies of Italy, basically. Is that what we can call it?
yeah. One thing, I just saw a preview video of the Italian Bersaglieri plastic set.
Yeah.
I think that War Games Illustrated got them way ahead of time. So don't go look at them.
Oh yeah, well everyone,
at,
I saw some images online as well. They are leaking
yeah,
out.
they've been teasing them for a long
Yes,
time.
for
So
quite a long time. So they are coming, and we are prepping for that today. So
yeah.
you, I know you saw this PDF Armies of Italy version 2 online, right? And you contacted the author Lorenzo and ended up actually doing some of the work on the PDF as well for him. Is that right?
Yeah. It started by like I mentioned in when I was a guest at your on your channel the last time. I have this fascination for Italy. I have no idea why, but I keep returning to them in bold action all the time.
Yeah.
And right now I am painting my third Italian army. And at the time I bought the figures, and then I thought, oh wow, I wonder which national rules they have. And I was very, very disappointed. And I thought, bloody hell, this is going to be an uphill battle, getting these to work. And then sort of looking at the Bold Action Facebook group, there was a lot of talk about whether the national rules should be better, whether the national rules from the Western Desert book should be sort of like the new
rules,
national rules for any campaign that you played with the Italians. And then this guy pops up, Lorenzo Di Florio, who I'd never noticed or anything before, and he said he came with a few pointers, and he said that he had the rule set in Italian, and I thought, oh, I would really love to see it, but in English.
Please.
And then I contacted him, and he said, I'm in the process of translating everything. And I said, well, can I see what you have? And he sent me the Word file that he was working on, and I was immediately impressed. Not by the layout, because I work in graphic design, so I'm a bit biased in that way.
No, Kaspar is also our go-to man for layout, for diplomas and everything, like prizes, everything. We always like throw it at Kaspar, say, do something amazing with this, and he comes up with amazing stuff every time. So, yeah. And you guys are going to see the PDF in a moment, and I'm also going to make a link in the doobly-doo where you can actually go and see it as well.
So I thought about maybe uploading it again as a file in the Bold Action group.
Which is not
but again, I'd really like to reiterate that I'm not the author of this.
No. This is Lorenzo.
It is Lorenzo.
You've just done a bit of graphics and editing, and
I've just polished it.
Yeah, basically. So what we're going to do now is we're going to open up the file, let people look while we talk through it, basically, and we will give our comments on what we see. Me, of course, from a competitive standpoint, you from more of a historical standpoint, and I think we're both pretty happy about the Lorenzo's results here. So
Yeah.
I will share my screen and we can go and see what he's done. And here we go. So Armies of Italy, version 2 by Lorenzo de Florio. This is an amazing piece of work. Lorenzo, if you see this video, thank you so much for your work on this. We really hope that Warlord Games basically takes what you've done with this and just run with it. So this is mostly focused, am I right, on the Royal Italian Army, so fascist Italy, and not so much post surrender and Republican Italy and the civil war that broke out there. So we're only focusing on the first bit. Yeah.
Yeah, up until September 1943.
Yeah. So this is for early and mid-war Italy. Which means all the overpowered Paradutici units of the late war are out, which is cool. I really like this. So, and look at this. We have a forward, and all the sources are listed here. Yes, of course, most of them are in Italian, but this has been an amazing piece of work by Lorenzo. All of this, he's gone through all of it. And it's really well edited and it's really well thought out. And for most of the changes that he actually brings, he makes notes about why he brings those changes, which is really, really cool.
Yeah, so, and he references to which book he has found the relevant information in. So it's really good.
It's really well researched, this piece of So, and he starts out with the national special rules. So I think we should start there as well. He keeps Avanti Savoia, although I think it's a bit different than what we're used to here.
It is.
So it's keep track of the order dice lost during the fight. If the number is +3, all Italian units gain +1 morale. So basically, it loses the negative morale, that modifier that was there before. For me, that was overly punitive towards Italian players. It punished them really rather severely, and was basically not fun to play, because once you were losing, you would immediately lose. All Italian armies, no matter how well you built them, became glass cannons. Basically, they would crumble. And you played many Italian armies, right, Kaspar? So how did you find the old rule here?
Like you said, if you went down by 3 dice, you started losing very fast. And it was basically over from that point. One thing I noticed as well, if somebody was writing in the Facebook group, Bold Action Facebook group, and they said, point me towards the best build for an Italian army. Most people would say you need to go veteran. You need to go veteran because
that would be my advice every time on the old Italian rules. I know I haven't actually published. I have ready to go more or less in a competitive Italian tutorial, but and there's a lot of veterans that you need to go if you want to go with the original Italian rules, basically. So that is.
And I think this one, it's not overpowered at all. It just removes the negative because again, why did Warlord Games make a negative rule that is really severe? I know there was an upside to the rule as well.
Yeah, but it wasn't enough to like offset the cost of it, was it?
No.
And I know that they have some nations where they give negative rules, like minor nations, typically, Denmark, for instance. But most of the time, that represents them being a minor, not very powerful nation. This is one of the big nations of World War II. This was one of the major Axis powers, and they were just penalized That really sucked. And then we have the I'm not going to attempt Ferrera Mole Ferrero Curo. I have no Italian skills. Iron hearts and iron halls, iron hearts. So you can re-roll advanced tests if you have an armor value of 7+. I really like this one as
advanced
well.
and run order
And
tests.
run.
Yeah.
It really makes for a more mobile Italian armored force, basically.
Yeah.
So this one I really like. And it's a cool rule, and I think especially would benefit Italian tank platoons.
It will, yeah.
Yeah, they will become very, very good if this rule is made like available to them, because that reroll will mean that most pins will not matter for an Italian tank most of the time.
Most I might be wrong here, but most Italian armor went to North Africa.
Yeah,
and in the big tank battles against first the British and then the Americans, they didn't have the penetration, so they had to move closer, a lot closer.
Yeah.
And this rule
it really
is basically that. Yeah, they were pretty fearless.
Yeah. I've read a big book about the Desert War, and they were I mean, even the Allies were noting down how crazy they felt it was like fighting against Italian tanks, because the Italian tanks would rush at them at high speed, just rush straight at them in the hope of gaining the side so they could take side shots. Which, of course, against the Sherman tank, you're going to have to be lucky to do that. But and then we have the Italian artillery, anti-tank rifles and anti-tank guns. They also get a special rule. They gain stubborn if they're purchased as veteran. This will not, for me, have a lot of effect, but I do feel like it reflects some historical maybe oddities of Italian artillery, which is nice to have that reflected in the rules. It's not something that's overpowered in any way.
It's a nice flavor rule, and
it's a nice
again
flavor,
it's based on history as well. Both the Italian allies and the British and the Americans noted that the artillerymen were very skilled and they were very fearless.
Yeah.
And again, it's something, if you take it on a veteran Elefantino, the cost is 45. If you take it as veteran, it's 54. And then those 9 points might be well spent, because you make them a bit more survivable, and it's not a crazy cost, but it's not something that you gain for free either. So
yeah, it's very good. So, and especially on veterans, like I feel like that is both where it's like justified, and it's also where it's useful. Veterans, because they have that extra morale, are pretty likely to stick around, especially if they're going on this stubborn. Right. And then we have the tank assault tactics. Now, you've already made lists using this one. I've seen your lists for that. So, and I mean, I would not normally ever use anti-tank grenades, but with this rule where if it's stationary, you hit on, well, basically you hit on a +1 instead of what would normally be. So you're hitting on 3+ or 5+ instead of 6s and 4s.
Yeah.
This is really cool. I really see this as being a benefit to the anti-tank grenades. So for me, that makes anti-tank grenades way more interesting. You can really mess up a heavy tank with 10 dudes running up and hitting on 3+. That will...
Yeah, and it's good. And again, the notable examples that Lorenzo puts in are the behavior of the Pavia and Folgore division against the assault of British armored division at El Alamein. There's this movie. I have no idea what it's called, but there was I think there's a clip on YouTube where you see Italian folgore. They've sort of made, it looks like small graves where they are, and they wait until the Sherman tanks come, and when they come, they leap out of these graves and they put all kinds of demolition, hand grenades, anti-tank mines, everything, and then they roll into the next one. It of course it's Hollywood, or at least a movie, but you can see why Lorenzo has included this, because this is what they had to do, because the caliber of their AT guns, it was simply not big enough. So they had to find another way. And this was one of the things that they did.
I also quite like it because it gives. Most armies have something that makes them special, like some piece of equipment that makes them special, right? The Germans had the Panzerfaust until every Soviet player had 10 Panzerfaust in their force, right? The Soviets had the dog mines. The Japanese had the suiciders. I mean, the British had the Gurkhas. Every force had something that was theirs and theirs alone. The Italians didn't really, but this gives them a piece of equipment that's better than average, and it's not overpowered in any way. It's still your infantry assaulting tanks. I really like this. Because it makes a difference to how you would build Italian armies and what you would do with them. Then we have the defensive tactics. That is standard from the book. It's when you have the attacker-defender scenarios. Italy can always choose to be the defender, right? And they can get some fortifications for doing that, which is always pretty good. So they're a nice defensive army.
I think, even though, as he says, this is a 5th Italian rule, and most other nations have 4, this one will not pop up that many times. And it's okay if you play attacker defender, but most of the tournaments that you'll go to, they will not be attacker defender.
Yeah, they don't use the attacker defender rules. Typically, although they do sometimes have some. I've seen tournaments use envelopment, for instance, and there you have attacker defender. But that's basically the only one you will see in some tournaments. So I really like this.
The other 4. There are 2 that you gain without using any points, and there are 2 that's come into play if you use the points. So I don't think this is overpowered at all. I just think it gives some flavor, and it removes the negative national rules that have put so many people off playing Italians.
It does. Right, and then we get to the infantry, and as we can see, Lorenzo has made a nice overview before we start on the actual units themselves, where he he notes down what he's changing up, what is new. So I really like this, and he even argues for why the late war Pereducitis should be removed, which is perfect. So this is a nice overview for me of what has changed and what's not. So I can basically skip down to what I need to relearn while reading this, and that is really good. I think especially the infantry for me, the standard infantry unit has some really nice changes, which I think we should start with. So here we go. This is the standard infantry for Lorenzo's version 2 of the Italian army. You buy them pretty much as you've always done. They have rifles. You can buy extra men. The NCO can get an assault machine gun. You can get a light machine gun. The non-inexperienced squads can have anti-tank grenades, and I like that he says the inexperienced squads can't, because this
Yeah.
is again a question of how much power do you want to give the power players like me? Because I would immediately go for inexperienced squads and then give them anti-tank grenades and just rush at the enemy tanks. But you can't here. You're going to have to go regular or veteran, which makes perfect sense from a thematic standpoint.
Yeah.
And then, of course, for me, the standout here is they can be green for free, and you can buy
Yeah.
shirkers. That combination makes for really easy multiple small unit Italy, where you can buy a lot of cheap infantry units, backline holders that are not going to do much if you want to go that route, which means that you don't have to go all veteran anymore. This is amazing. I
Yeah.
love this. Yeah. For you, what did you think about it when you saw this combination here? Because I'm immediately seeing uh, like win at all cost possibilities. What were you
Yeah.
seeing?
Well, there's actually nothing new in this because you've always been able to buy inexperienced green shirkers.
Yeah,
Always.
yeah.
It's part of it.
You've
What
just
he's
been
done here, he's
discouraged from doing it, right?
exactly, but with no negative national rules, this is
Yeah,
suddenly an option,
yeah,
and it's a good option
yeah,
because a lot of the infantry that Italy had, the men were just as brave as any other soldier.
yeah,
They lacked equipment and they lacked good officers, so there was a lot of soldiers that were inexperienced. And this allows you to play that way if you
yeah.
are going to play historical and
Hmm.
not be brutally penalized for it.
Yes, yes. So
So
I really like the opportunity of doing this.
yeah,
Then we have the Bersaglieris,
yeah.
which I guess are pretty much as they've been, or what? There's a
No, no, no,
command
no,
here.
no.
Oh,
They've become very cool. The Bersaglieri in the Warlord book
yeah,
is basically a veteran unit where
yeah,
you could have two light machine guns. And that is because Warlord games have sort of ignored the way that an Italian platoon is made.
yeah,
And I don't have all the details, but the Italian army decided that it needed to look um, bigger on paper. So instead of having three squads in every platoon,
yeah.
they had two big squads.
Okay.
Uh, they had a binary platoon,
Mm,
and what Warlord did, and this is another way of interpreting it, is saying, okay, if they had this, we could easily put two LMGs into the Bersaglieri, sort of
yeah,
making like Panzer Grenadiers, because it is more or less their role. They were
mm,
elite infantry,
yeah.
very good at moving and shooting. The best,
Skirmishes. Yeah,
yeah, very good skirmishers. And he said, well, if you have a group or a section, they would only have one LMG. So what
mm,
he has done here is he has made them so that they can only have one LMG, like
yeah.
most others. But because they were elite skirmishers, um, he made this rule called rapid deployment,
Which
which is
sort of
basically this
mirrors the same rule as the tanks get, right? So
exactly.
I like this repetition of rules, and it's a skirmisher rule. That
Yeah,
is what makes them amazing here. Yeah,
they they
the-
they are. I really this sort of this unit represents uh, this book very good. He's
yeah,
saying something that was very good,
yeah,
the possibility of having two LMGs, and said this is not historically
yeah.
correct. I will remove
Remove
one,
that.
even though it makes the unit a bit worse.
Well, the double
Um,
LMGs also made them very expensive, so yeah.
exactly, but I've played with two
Yeah,
LMGs
I
in it.
know, I know. I would never
So,
do it, but I know you have.
uh,
Yeah,
And then he said, but I want to have something with this unit that makes them different than other veteran infantry.
Yeah.
Because
And
that is
that's
basically the problem with the Warlord games veteran infantry. They were more or less the same.
And you know what it
They
also
just had
does?
different
It
names.
it actually moves them from being backline troops with the double LMGs
Mm.
into that role which they had historically. They are skirmish infantry now. They are
Yeah,
infantry which wants to move up. I really like that.
yeah,
Well thought out rule, Lorenzo. Well done. We like that. Then we have the black shirts.
yeah.
These
That's,
can be bought
yeah.
as inexperienced, regular, or veteran. And they can get fanatic, they can have anti-tank grenades. So we have the possibility of having a few SMGs, but not all SMGs,
Yeah.
which I like as
Thi-
well,
thi-
because the SMGs
This
were
is
not
yeah.
everywhere in the Italian army, right? They
No,
were like not widely distributed.
not at all. This is the one infantry unit where he has made the most changes,
Yeah,
and it's basically because the black shirts in the regular book, the normal book or the official
yeah,
book,
yeah,
were all regulars, and they had this non testati rule,
yeah,
which was that when they were first shot at, or either shot at or had their first casualty, you would roll a die,
yeah,
and if it was, I think, one or two, they would become shirkers.
yeah.
And if it was five or six, they would become fanatics. And it's sort of like it's
It's
like
just too
a
random.
lottery
Yeah,
coupon.
it's a green rule without any historical foundation, and
Yeah,
it's just randomness for randomness sake, which meant
yeah,
that most people would never take black
they would
shirts.
never take them. And
But
what
now
he has done is he's
they're pretty interesting.
yeah, they are, because the so-called M battalions, the M stands for Mussolini,
Yeah,
because of course, why not? And the picture that you can see here, that is on their collar. It was black, and then there was a red M, and
yeah,
it's actually an M you can see, but it's a very elaborate font, so it's
yeah.
difficult to
It's
see.
difficult to read.
And yeah, these were the veterans. These were sort of like veteran Waffen SS,
Yeah,
and they were just as crazy, which is why you can put fanatics on them.
yeah.
And
And that can be a really strong choice. If you have the points
yeah,
going for SMGs on Fanatics, that combination is that's when
yeah,
you get into SAS territory for the Brits, or I mean, um, Japanese cavalry. That combination of tough fighter and fanatic is
yeah,
really, really strong, especially on veterans. So although it is expensive, yes, I know,
it
paying
is.
3 points for the Fanatics and 3 points for the SMGs, it is a very strong option to go.
Yeah, and
So,
it's something that's different than what they've had. So I really like it.
yes, and it gives the Italians a real assaulty unit, which they didn't have
Yeah,
before. Um, so again, very good choice. Then we have the Paratigi, the paratroopers. Again,
yeah,
this is something where he's basically just copied over and made small adjustments for the equipment.
yeah,
The 3 men can have SMGs and the NCO can. And I think that was just because in the official rulebook there were just too many SMGs being
yeah,
distributed out.
exactly.
Um,
Which
and
is also what he's written in his comment.
yeah,
There's an overabundance of
yeah, yeah,
the
exactly.
Beretta SMG. So that's all he has done.
Yeah. It makes perfect sense. It doesn't
Yeah,
like detract from the unit in any way because you still have
no,
some SMGs. Most of the time you'll put in a few rifles anyway to take
yeah,
casualties and to have that extra range for the first bit of the game. Then we have the San Marco Marines. I
yeah.
don't remember these from the original book.
Oh, they're there. And they
Um,
they they were only deployed in North Africa, and they were
okay.
basically the part of the Italian Navy.
Yeah.
And what he's done here is he's kept the rule that they had behind enemy lines, which is also in the official book. But these were actually equipped with more submachine guns than the one that the NCO gets in the official book. So he has given them the option of having SMGs for 3 men, which is again a small adjustment, but again
still very,
rooted
very
in
nice
history
behind
and
enemy lines with SMGs. It's what many of the other nations also combined. So yeah, really nice. And then we have the Grenadiers. These were not in the official book, right?
Nope, they were not.
And it's a very specific unit created by the first king of Italy, Emmanuel II. They were very physically fit, very tall men. So he's given them tough fighters, which makes perfect sense for me. That they were sort of an elite corps, sort of a bodyguard for the king or whatever, originally. So they would be big and strong and fit and fierce, well-trained veteran infantry. That tough fighter makes perfect sense for me. They have a pretty standard loadout for equipment and men. It's just a little bit of flavor that makes sense if you want to build historical units. Here comes one of the big ones. We already talked a bit about this one. I know you, Kaspar, are a fan of the Solothurn anti-tank rifle. I am definitely not in the standard formation, but he has made changes to it, which I think is quite interesting because his argumentation is that the anti-tank rifle of the Italians and maybe also of some other nations was particularly strong. They were using heavier ammunition, so it had a lot more punch and had a lot more range than the standard anti-tank rifle that was being employed by other armies. So he wants us to increase the range to 48. And I think this is a great idea, because that would mean you have 24 inches range on your plus for the anti-tank rifle, which is not much, but it just gives them a little bit more edge and it makes them a little bit more worth the points, basically. So I really like that.
I like the anti-tank rifle as it is, basically, but this just makes them really, really good. You get the increased range, so you add 48, and it's not so much that you can shoot across the battlefield, but you also
48
get
is still, you can reach the back line of the enemy's
you can.
zone.
But you are also within normal shooting range at 24. Yeah. And he has all of his reasoning in the comments. And again, he has looked at it's the same as an autocannon. What range is an autocannon? It is 48. I'll make this 48 as well. And the last line says this change should also be applied to all 20mm AT rifles, in my opinion, like the Japanese Type 97 and Finnish L39. I have no idea about those, but I think it's very nice that he sort of says these are similar weapons. And of course,
and he even prices it correctly, because he says plus 5 points. That would mean that they're on point with what they should be. That is really cool. Again, it gives them something special, and it is priced correctly in points. Perfect change for me. Flamethrower team, not a lot of changes for that. Marksman.
There's one
minor
interesting one. Yeah, the flamer, because he puts two options here. You either have the normal
or the
flamethrower, or 2 one-shot flamethrowers.
Yeah,
I never heard of them.
No, me neither.
So you can actually have a small team.
A Model 41 assault flamethrower.
Yeah. So you can have a small team with 2 one-shot flamethrowers in them. So if one runs dry,
you shoot the other.
It's a one-shot weapon, but you can fire 2 at the same time.
Yeah. Interesting. Interesting.
Yeah,
Um, and we do have other one-shot flamethrowers scattered around in other armies. Then we have the marksman,
yeah,
who is
yeah,
a lone sniper. We have that in other armies, so he's basically just copied what that does.
yeah,
And then we have the artillery. Again, he's included this very nice overview. I am not very skilled at looking at the Italian artillery. I guess you have more to say on this. What do you think about the changes that he's making? He's making a few changes.
yeah,
One for light artillery, one for the Canone 75, and one for the Canone 90. The rest
yeah.
is basically the same, right?
Yeah, what he's done with the light artillery is giving them the option of having an armor-piercing shell,
Yeah.
which basically means that if you load the gun with that armor-piercing shell, you get a +3 in penetration,
Mm.
which is similar to other guns that you can take in
Yeah.
the game.
Yeah.
And again,
Yeah, he's
because
copied
uh,
something that you do with the British guns, right?
yeah,
I think so.
and
Yeah.
it's the same with the next one that you have, which is a new profile, and it's an Italian medium anti-tank gun.
Yeah.
Because the one uh, in the official book is actually a Pack 38, which were gifted from the Germans to the Italians for use on the Eastern Front. But this
Right.
one, as Lorenzo says in his comment, was used in all theaters
Mm.
of war,
Mm.
and it's a medium anti-tank gun, but it's also versatile, so it can fire
Yeah.
as a light
Light
howitzer.
howitzer,
Of course,
which I think
yeah,
makes it way more useful because, I
yeah,
mean,
exactly.
um, viewers of my channel know that I am not a fan of anti-tank guns. But if you have it so that it can be both, then it starts being really useful.
Yeah,
Um, because you
so
can
it's
lock
it's
down
it's a good
lanes
it's a good
of
instrument.
fire, and you can, at the same time, you can shoot indirectly if you want to. So it's really good.
Yeah,
It's a good change. And then we have the
and the
Canon
last,
90,
yeah,
which I guess is an sort of an 88.
it is. He has just made sort of the changes so that it's similar to a
Yeah,
German 88. So you can
because
put a
that was what it
spotter on
was
it, and
in real life as well, right?
yeah, so it can be fired as a medium howitzer, and you can add a spotter to it,
Yeah.
which was something that you could not do. Um, Again, it cost the same as an 88,
Mm.
with with the exception of 5 points because it didn't have a gun shield, and it was a huge gun.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's
So
more or less
that
the
that that
artillery.
was some that was some good changes, I think. Then we
Yeah,
have some of the vehicles. Again, he has made a few changes. Some of them are just long range rule changes because they're equipped with the Southern anti-tank rifle. Um, some of them have been removed because they are in the late war, and
yeah,
there are a few new profiles, new proposals
yeah.
scattered in amongst them as well. Again, I'm not very knowledgeable about Italian armor, um,
Mm,
but the first one, which I think is really nice that he includes this, is he includes this general consideration, the vulnerable rule. Italians have been massively in the normal rule set. Most of their tanks are very, very bad. They're
yeah,
under armored, they're vulnerable, they have the riveted rules. Everything is just weaker than the opposition, which, yes, okay, the Italian tanks were maybe not the best armored, but they were not on par with the Japanese. For instance, the
no,
Japanese were famous for having like paper tanks, right? The
yeah,
Japanese were that. The Italian tanks were not that bad. So maybe one should look at this. And I think the conclusion he comes to is logical. I think the rule, as he states it, should be eliminated or should be applied equally to the same
yeah,
level of armor. Um,
yeah,
so, and he has a few new versions here. He has the L3, which I know you've used on occasion.
yeah.
What do
What
you
what
think of
what
this one?
he's done here, I think all the changes are very, very good, both historically and all actually also competitively.
Mm.
If you take this tank in the official rules, it is not an armored car.
No.
It is a tank.
Yeah. And it's a
And
tankette, and most tankettes are in the armored car slots.
yeah, it was when the war broke out, this was obsolete,
Yeah.
more or less.
Yeah.
And the Italians knew this, but this was the most numerous tank they had.
Yeah.
But they knew that there was no way an anti-tank rifle could do Allied armor anything.
Yeah.
So they were sort of redeployed to reconnaissance units,
Mm.
and because they're very fast,
Yeah.
and they are. If you see pictures of these, they are so small
Yeah.
you won't
Very
believe it.
low.
So yeah, a normal man. I think I would. I'm quite tall.
Yeah.
I'm 6'4". But this tank would not reach my my arms.
No.
It is
No.
really small.
Yeah.
But what he has done here is he has said, okay, this one is a fast little tank,
Mm.
so it gains recce, which it didn't have, which makes it very much more survivable. Uh, he has kept all the options that is in the standard book, but instead of the tank sort of being normal, and if you put a flamethrower on it, it becomes slow. It
Yeah.
is now with recce and not slow. I think that's actually a mistake here that it says it's slow, but it makes it a lot more survivable.
Well, yeah,
And
the flamethrower, the recce thing, but you can argue because it's when it's a flamethrower version, it's dragging the flamethrower
it
fuel
is,
behind it, so it
yeah,
might
it
slow it
it,
down
it
a bit.
should it
But
should
yeah,
lose the recce rule. I'm not
it
quite
should.
sure whether it should be slow, but
No,
it
no,
should lose
maybe
the
not.
recce rule. Yeah,
Right. Right, so this is a nice little addition. I like it a lot. Then we have the Fiat, which I guess is pretty non-controversial. It's just an
yeah.
HMG and a turret.
It's a
That's
World War
fine.
One tank,
It's a
basically.
World War One armored car. Perfectly fine.
Yeah,
We saw a lot of these in minor nations and also in the early war for major nations. The same can be said about the
yeah,
AB611. Again, an early war 1920s, 30s armored car. You can
yeah.
swap out the LMG with a light AT gun. Okay. It's really
Mhm.
non-controversial. I think this should just go straight into the rule book, and as he states, it fought in East Africa. I've researched not Italian East Africa, but I have researched quite a lot about the opposition that they were fighting in
Yeah,
the Ethiopian campaigns. So I know these armored cars were gunning down Ethiopians there. So yeah. Then we have the M15, which is one of the main draws for me for the normal Italian list, and this changes it up quite a bit because this is the Italian version of a Darker Stewart, right? It has a lot of machine guns, and in the normal book, it has a light AT gun, um, and it's costed pretty much as a Stewart is. Now
yeah,
he changes it up into a medium tank. He increases the armor, 9 plus, and he increases the AT gun to a medium AT gun. It still has a
yeah.
lot of machine guns, um, and he also
It
ups the
loses
crossbow.
one.
It loses one,
Yeah,
yeah, which I
yeah,
think is perfectly fine. It was over machine gunned anyway. Um,
yeah.
and you can still add a pintle mounted machine gun if you want to go for that 4 machine gun madness. Um, and he keeps it vulnerable. I am enjoying this change as well because this this makes it into a more expensive but still very very interesting Darker tank. Now it's a 9
Yeah.
plus Darker tank. I think that if this becomes the standard, I think that this tank would be taken in most Italian competitive lists. It's
I think so
really
too.
good.
Yeah.
It's
And
really good,
again,
and it's more expensive, so you're not going to see as many of them. But yeah,
yeah, I've never used this because I've primarily played Eastern Front Italians
yeah,
and
they didn't bring these.
Balkan Italians. Nope, they weren't deployed there.
Yeah,
Uh, but what I really really like, and this is something that is on every unit entry. It's his comments,
yeah,
his reasoning for why
yeah.
he has made the changes he has, and nobody can argue with these.
No,
He has comparison of the different types of similar tanks and what their armor was. There is nothing you can basically look at here and say, oh, this is just
wrong
to
or
try
no.
and
Yeah.
buff up or beef up the Italians. It's I think it's very
No, and
good.
it's especially telling because he compares it to the other Italian Semoventi 75, right? That they
Mm,
have exactly the same armor specs, exactly the same.
yeah,
So, I mean, they should be similarly armored. There's nothing like wrong with this line of reasoning. It's perfect. So I
yeah,
really like this. Yeah. And giving them vulnerable will mean that it's still like soft in the side, which I think it should be. I think this is just this is some really good changes for this one.
yeah.
And then he has the P26, which I don't know at all. Do you
I
know
don't
this tank?
either.
Uh, yeah. Um,
It's I think it's one of these it's one of these that was mostly on the drawing board, and there weren't made that many. And like Lorenzo has written here, in my opinion, the P2640 should also be open to selection in a reinforced generic
yeah.
platoon for an equal treatment,
Like other
like Dad's Army, for instance.
hypothetical
This is,
tanks. Yeah.
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 Uh, it's not something that you would use in a historical list at all. But
No.
again, it's like the Chinu medium tank for Japan, which
Yeah.
more or less never left the factory, but it's still made a unit profile for it, and he's
Yeah.
done the same here.
Yeah. Yeah. That for me is perfectly fine. It's not a tank that I find especially appealing, but I
Yeah,
think like having, I mean, for instance, the Kugelblitz for Germans, right? That makes an appearance an insane amount of times, and they had only made like 4 of them. So why
mm,
not have at least 1 or 2 of these drive out of the factory? Let's do that.
yeah,
Perfectly fine. Then we have the Semoventes. They are always interesting because
yeah.
it's like
This
a
this one,
yeah.
I
It's
like this one. I
you
really
like this
really
one?
like it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
it
it's
is, pardon my language, it's shitty in the
yes,
original rules
it's really
because
crap.
it's really cheap. It costs 85 points in the
Yeah,
original rules. It has a hull-mounted light anti-tank gun, and it's armor 7.
yeah. So
And I
it's a
always
crap
thought,
tank.
why is it armor 7? Because it's based
Yeah,
on the chassis of the L640, which is
yeah,
armor 8.
yeah.
They
So that
just
makes
removed the
no
turret.
sense at all.
So what Lorenzo has done is he's made it armor 8, which
Yeah,
is better.
yeah. And then up the
The
cost a bit.
options, yeah, up the cost, and because it is still capable of driving at the same speed at the L6 as the L640. I
Mm,
actually checked that as well,
yeah.
and it's true. It's a very fast self-propelled gun. It has been given recce as well because the L640 has recce because it is
Mm.
fast.
For me,
So
that
this
is
one,
sort of a controversial choice because for
hmm,
me, Reki somehow represents units that were reconnaissance units.
yeah,
And this is sort of a tank hunter unit-ish thing, which I think
it is a very small tank hunter.
very, very small tank hunter.
Yeah,
So it is a controversial bit, but I understand the reasoning behind it because it is it drives at the same speed as the other one.
yeah,
Why not give it recce? I I don't think that Recce should be on non-reconnaissance units, if that makes sense. So
Yeah.
unless we can demonstrate that this was actually given to reconnaissance units, this is the one thing so far that I've taken issue with. So
I've used this a lot of times
yeah,
because it was the only option. Because when I play Italians, I normally play them at the Eastern Front, and at the Eastern Front there were no armored divisions, but they had a fast division, which was Bersaglieri, it was cavalry, and it was a few tanks. And these tanks were the L640 and this Semovente 4732, and they were used for reconnaissance, and they were
okay,
used as the spearhead. So I think you can argue that it was used for reconnaissance duties, but in
yeah,
Africa it was also used in tank platoons.
yeah. So maybe it should be a theater thing, whether or not it has Reiki.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Anyways, the Semovente 75 has also been corrected in
yeah,
Lorenzo's language here. There was a like difference. The rules were not reflective of what was actually the case for the
yeah,
Semovente 75. Perfectly fine. The Semovente 90.
yeah,
Again, he has issue with the armor, and I
yeah,
can understand that. Because it does have very angled armor, so I think that it shouldn't be a 7+ armored one. It should be an 8+, because that angle does give it a lot more protection.
yeah.
So
And again,
again,
it's built on the chassis of an Armor 8 tank,
yeah,
so it doesn't make sense that it was Armor 7.
exactly. So, and then we have the Semovente 105, which is a beast of a,
Yeah,
yeah, a big gun. Heavy
it
anti-tank
is.
gun, a 9+ medium tank. Right, high explosive shell,
Yeah,
HE3. That seems perfectly
yeah,
fine. 230 regular. It's also priced very reasonably. It's not something that you would normally take, but if you're going to take a heavy tank hunter for the Italians, that is the price that you're going to pay for
yeah.
it. It's
And
there's
these
no
were,
reason not to make these changes.
no, there was not a lot of these either. These were
No,
some of the last tanks that the Italians made.
yeah.
And
Late
I
war,
have
late
no idea whether they
40s.
actually saw combat.
Right. And then we have the M40 Command Tank. Again, this is
Yeah,
not something that I would go hunting for. It is perfectly fine. It has two hull-mounted machine guns. It's a 9
yeah,
plus. You can replace with an HMG. Not something I think you should do most of the time, but you can. And you can downgrade
no,
it so that it becomes a light tank and slow. I guess this is again one of those the same chassis that they are using,
exactly.
and then just removing all the combat and just sticking a commander in it. Uh, it makes perfect sense, and you can run this as your commander in tank platoons. It would make so much thematic sense for that.
Yeah,
Um, and they were in the Western Desert, but yeah,
yeah,
right. Then we have some self-propelled artillery as well. These were some of the, I mean, Italians are, for me, famous for their wacky trucks with sticking a gun on it. And these really reflect that as well. So again, very nice little additions and changes.
yeah. Like, as he says here, there was one in the normal book, and then was one in the Western Desert book, and
Yep.
he's just combined the two profiles.
Yes,
That's more or less it.
that makes sense. And the S-37, again, is a self-propelled artillery with a light anti-tank gun or forward-facing flamethrower. So
Yeah,
this is a 7+, maybe a flamethrower vehicle.
yeah,
That might be worth it. 90 points.
yeah. This is actually the Auto Protetto
Yeah,
transport,
yeah,
which was given a few weapons, and primarily, I think, used in the Balkans. for anti-partisan fighting.
Yep. And competitively, this is very, very similar to the BA-20 with the flamethrower turret. So I think this is a perfect addition, and the BA-20 is a very good choice of a self-propelled something. Although I'm pretty. Why is it in the self-propelled artillery slot here? Why is it not an armored car? Why is it not an armored car? Anyways, right. He has some anti-aircraft vehicles as well. Of course, they need some flak vehicles. Here we have the Italian version of the 88 mounted on a truck. And this is just machine guns on trucks. So we have MMG on a rotating platform, and you can use the Beretta 20mm autocannon perfectly fine. Is there anything that stands out to you here?
No, not really. He's just combined the profiles and said instead of that you either had to take a truck with a Beretta or with the huge gun, you can have them with just an MMG if that's what you want.
Yep. And then some transport. We have the Fiat Protetto, which is very interesting because it's an armored carrier with a capacity of 12 men. So that's a lot of dudes. It's basically a Hanomag, but on wheels. It is open-topped still, but it becomes more interesting, right? It is pretty expensive in points, but
because the Auto Protetto that I mentioned before is very, very similar to this, but it only has a capacity of 8 men.
Yeah.
So this gives you the option of putting a really big unit in it.
Yeah. Maybe even with a lieutenant, because I noticed that many of the units have an 11-man capacity, and then you can stick your lieutenant in with them, and he can give them morale bonus so that when they get pinned from the open top, they can still get out and shoot.
Yeah.
I like it. Right. And then he has made some very nice, I'm not going to go too much into these, but the theater selectors, they're very nice, they're very thematic. One thing I would notice, Lorenzo, is it would be very nice if these theater selectors actually had some special rules to reflect each selector more, so they become a little bit different. Otherwise, they're just very basic Italian stuff. You can do a little variation of how many vehicles you have or how many of these units, and that is perfectly fine. That's all thematic, but some special rules to reflect that would be nice. If anyone could come up with some, that would be awesome. I don't know enough about the
I think there are 1 or 2. But you're right. They're very, very basic, and it's basically more or less a listing of what was available in each theater.
And I think at least when we look at other theater selectors, many of them do have special rules for that theater selector. And I think you can easily do this and get away with it and still be within what Warlord Games has sort of made for this. So finding one special rule per selector might be perfectly fine. Here we have one of the special rules where you get to use Alpini skiers. Not that they are they're very situational, right? But it's a nice addition, and a very again very thematic. With the invasion of Yugoslavia, there is some. There are wasn't there one vehicle? Something that was only used here. I can't remember.
There are 2 selectors: the invasion of the Alps and the first army that went to Russia, where you have the option of taking 2 of the L3 tankettes. Because that was the only armor that was present. So he has put 0 to 2 vehicles for that.
Yep. And we have Eastern Africa here, where of course there's a mandatory Ethiopian, Somali, Askari force, so colonial troops. That makes
Colonial infantry.
perfect sense for me. And we have for the invasion of Egypt as well. Again, I think these could have a special rule of some sort. I really like that he thinks about what units were actually there and then says this is what you can take. There's one a little bit later on that says because the Paraduciti were all wiped out in this El Alamein battle, then they can't be in the later Tunisia campaign, which is this one, right? Exactly. The Paraduciti, they were gone, so no more Paraduciti. That is dedication to the theme and the history of these selectors. So really well done for that as well. And then of course here comes your favorite, I guess, the Eastern Front.
Oh, it's the next one.
It's the next one.
Eastern. Yeah, it's the next one.
The Army Eastern Front. Okay.
Yeah.
You must include at least one Alpini, and you can upgrade to skiers. And you can gain the behind the enemy lines rule. Nice.
Yeah, it's basically the same as the invasion of Greece, where you had the Alpini, you had an elite unit within them, the Monteserino.
Yeah.
If you see images of them, they are sort of like your Russian winter scouts. They are in white snowsuits, all of them.
Nice.
So it's very nice.
Right, and then finally we have the defense of Sicily. Again, I like it, really nice. And then the defense of Rome as well. This is when the Allies were moving up through Italy. I like it that there are two different selectors for these. Again, reflecting what was actually available for those two battles, more or less.
Yeah.
And then, of course, a generic reinforced platoon. And that is the alternative version for Italy version 2 here. So overall, I think this is a really nice addition. I think Warlord Games should seriously consider some of the proposals here. There were a few issues I had with like one or two things, and there were some suggestions, but overall, I am in awe of the work Lorenzo has put into this. What did you feel about it now that we've gone through it?
It just reinforces my opinion of it. It's a really excellent piece of work. The research, the reasoning for all the changes, the different things. He has not tried to make Italy the superpower of World War II.
No.
He's just tried to make it a playable nation, and he's also added in units that Warlord Games had not done, and he's changed units, some for the better, some for worse, but he has his reasoning behind him. And if you are planning on playing Italy, you are basically missing out if you are not at least looking at this. For myself, this is the reason why I have started my third army. I've used this before, but sort of put it away because I found out I was the only one that was interested in this. And then I got chatting to one of the Scottish players during the weekend, and he said he had this huge Italian army lying around, and he was interested in starting them, but the national rules was sort of putting him off. I said, have you actually seen this before? This official document, and he didn't. So I sent it to him, and he was immediately so wow, this is very good from what I can see. This is not just some fanboy who has sat down and said, wow, I want to make this unit better because I have the figures for this. I want to make this tank better. this is something that has been carefully researched, and it just makes a lot of difference. And the TOs that I have presented this for have all said, bring it. You can easily take this. I know it will not go in the VTC
Maybe not,
games,
but
but
let's see if we can sell Warlord on it, because
yeah,
for me, this is even better research than Warlord's own
it is.
Armies of Italy.
Yeah,
I mean, this
it is.
is really well made.
Yeah.
Right. So that was our review of Italy version 2. I hope you all enjoyed it. Thank you so much, Kaspar, for joining me for this and sharing your knowledge and insights. And I do hope that we soon see the new plastic Italians. They are going to be great. And hopefully this PDF will sell them even better Warlord games. If you want to sell minis, I think you should upgrade the rules a bit. Just saying. Right. That was it, everyone.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.